For more on what went down in that wild hearing, Emily Jashinsky joins us now, the culture editor over at the Federalist, also the co-host of Counterpoints. Emily, great to have you with us.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
I thought it was a very fascinating hearing today, including the panic by the Democrats that there was any conversation around government censorship.
Actually, that's a really good point because a lot of the attention has been focused on what witnesses were saying and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but what was, I think, equally, if not more interesting, is the Democrat freak out over even asking these questions, which I guess is sort of proves the entire point
Yes.
of why they're doing this hearing, because they no longer want questions to be asked. It reminds me a lot of when Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger testified not too long ago. Democrats found every excuse to attack their credibility to the point where this was just like Olympic level gymnastics. And I think we saw the exact same thing happen today, if not at a higher level, because it's starting to feel like the dam is really breaking on this Biden.
And what's interesting about it is it's not explicitly partisan either. It's actually a bit more about the power of the government that these Democrats are zealously guarding, because if they wanted to, if they were trying to be honest about this, they could say, well, some of the censorship was happening under the Trump administration. Much of it was. Remember, that first Hunter Biden laptop story was censored while Donald Trump was still president of the United States. If the Democrats wanted to turn this into a partisan contest, they could. Oh, well, this happened under Trump and it shouldn't happen. But that's not what they're doing. They're zealously guarding the right to prevent the American people from finding out information that's inconvenient to the government.
That's a fascinating point, because I recently actually went, just sort of trying to sort through all of these allegations. I went back and looked at a couple of them to find the date and to see if this was something that was actually happening by sort of rogue actors in the FBI and the Department of Justice under Donald Trump. And yes, I mean, so much of this does go back to things that happened under the Trump administration, which tells us a couple of things. One, that, you have rogue actors who were basically trying to take Donald Trump down or boost Democrats under Trump's watch, and to do it without other people in the executive branch knowing, even though that's to whom they're supposed to be accountable. And on the other hand, it's such a good point that this could be a partisan cudgel. This could be a huge weapon Democrats would wield against Republicans, but I think they've weighed the cost-benefit analysis and realized the cost of doing that isn't worth what they see as the benefit of just massively increasing their power over the flow of information.
And they can't also, importantly with the Hunter Biden saga, they can't acknowledge the validity of the Hunter Biden story, or else it would undermine the current head of their party, Joe Biden. So that's why we end up with hearings like the one we had today, where you have a bunch of excellent witnesses talking about the ways in which they and their reporting was censored, and Democrats just freaking out and accusing them of being purveyors of hate speech.
Yeah, they cannot compute. It's amazing. And for some of them, it's one of two things. For some of them, it is willfully dishonest. And for others of them, it's just they have these incredible partisan blinders on, that when you have Robert F. Kennedy talking about how the Democratic Party used to be the anti-censorship party, to the extent that that's actually true, but you had him sort of waxing nostalgic about the Democratic Party of yore and the values that the Democratic Party is supposed to represent. And then all of the Democrats on the committee and in the entire House, pivot and prove him right completely, immediately prove that they're just completely antithetical. Their values are completely antithetical to the values that people used to proudly represent in this country. And so they just went out and proved him exactly right. And they're, that is a very small group of the country that agrees with them on what should be censored, and that the limits should be what they want them to be. But they're losing control and they're freaking out about it. And to the extent that people have hope, I think in our system, just looking at what happened with the two IRS whistleblowers over the last couple of days, Shapley and Ziegler, Democrats, by the way, people who are clearly not supportive of the Republican Party at the very least and don't have any motivation. They know that all they're going to do is get attacked and just killed in the media for speaking out, because for some people, this corruption level is actually intolerable. The censorship is actually intolerable. And whether you're RFK Jr. or Ziegler and Shapley, it should give us hope to know that some people are speaking out.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a moment today where a particularly smug, arrogant Democrat congressman named Dan Goldman was accusing the New York Post of not having done the footwork to corroborate the reality of the laptop. Now, that was a lie. The New York Post clearly had. Emma Jo Morris was the person who was now at Breitbart, but she was the deputy politics editor at the New York Post, whose name was on the byline. And she said, yeah, we checked that out. And he said, well, I doubt the New York Post has the forensic capability to even authenticate the laptop. But he's eliding, Emily Jashinsky, all sorts of history here. We know that multiple news organizations, among the earliest, the Daily Caller, did consult forensics experts, did verify the validity of these emails, did establish they actually came and went to Hunter Biden's email account, and therefore are, of course, completely newsworthy. And yet, to this very day, Democrats are pretending like there's a chance it may be fake.
And that's the other amazing thing. I mean, we've learned in the last couple of days that Twitter got confirmation from the FBI that the laptop was real because the FBI had it for a while, and the FBI confirmed the validity of that. Now, remember, all kinds of people in that community signed that 51 former intelligence officer letter that gave media kind of that fig leaf to censor the story enormously. But Twitter knew that, and Twitter censored all of this anyway to an extent. It's just that they simply don't care, and they're willing to compromise any values that they even think they have for the supposed greater good of shutting down conversation, period. They don't want to have a conversation about the Bidens. They don't want to ask questions about corruption because they think they know what's best for the country, and if they lose power, the country will spiral out of control, and the actual, the real American people, the unwashed masses, will have a say in our government, and that is a bridge too far for them now.
Here is some of the testimony today from Emma Jo Morris. She's now at Breitbart, but again, she was the byline on the New York Post report that first came out in October of 2020, and here's what she said about the reception to that report by the deep state clowns who sought to bury it.
The Post published exactly how the material for the reporting was obtained, even identifying our sources, as well as a federal subpoena showing the FBI was in possession of the material the story was based on and had been since December of 2019. But when the stories appeared on social media that morning, the venue where millions of Americans go to find their news and editors to get their angles, within hours, the reporting was censored on all major platforms on the basis of being called hacked or Russian disinformation. Twitter refused to allow users to share the link to the stories, banned the links from being shared in private messages, a policy, by the way, that's used to clamp down on child porn, and locked the Post out of its verified account. Facebook said it would curb distribution and reach of the links on its platform. However, the stories were not based on hacked materials, nor were they Russian disinformation. And despite those claims appearing to come out of thin air at the time, we would eventually learn that they actually didn't come out of thin air at all. On October 19th, 5 days after the Post began publishing, Politico ran a story headlined, "Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say." God, I can't even say that with a straight face,
Yeah, because it's a joke, Emily Jashinsky, and yet that was the pretext. You had people who knew better. The FBI had the laptop from December of 2019. They admitted to Twitter on the day of the New York Post's coverage that the laptop was real, and yet the censorship effort began.
That is just the most, I think it is the most illuminating point in all of this, that if people have any illusions that this is a gray area or, Twitter just made the wrong call and they Jack Dorsey eventually kind of walked back and Zuckerberg has kind of walked it back too. No, absolutely not. They knew, it was clear as day. It was black and white at the time that this was, let's say they didn't even want to trust the New York Post and they had, that embarrassing Dan Goldman sentiment towards the New York Post, which shows, again, just partisan blinders and how stupid that can make you. Even if that's where you are, then the FBI, which you revere, tells you it's real, and you can't even, you're still going to censor it. That just tells you absolutely everything you need to know about this, is that they genuinely don't care about, the free press.
Yes.
They don't care about facts. They just care about power.
RFK Jr. gave an impassioned opening remark today. I played some of it. I'll note that he didn't actually read from his prepared remarks because by the time he started speaking, Democrats had already launched so many attacks on him, he felt compelled to respond to them. And so he spoke from the heart extemporaneously. And as he was speaking, he reminded everyone that the United States led the world in this commitment to free speech, and that many countries actually model their free speech principles on the United States, and that if we fail to honor our commitment to the First Amendment, this will all collapse. Our republic does not work unless the First Amendment is honored and speech itself is robust. Do you think the Democrats got that message today, or do they understand, perhaps they understand how important speech is, and that's only made them double down their resolve to censor it?
I'm with you. I think the more that we have these conversations, the more they smear people as conspiracy theorists and bigots, because it's illuminated for them, especially over the course of COVID. And we've been getting new emails from the sort of inside, behind the curtain over the last couple of weeks too, about what influential, powerful elites were doing to obscure information about COVID that has now largely been vindicated. They were doing it then, but COVID was such an example for them of how, true information they feel like can be dangerous, because they fundamentally don't trust their peers. They don't trust their neighbors. They don't trust the American people. They think they need the final say. Their judgment is the only judgment that should govern the country. And so, to your point, Vince, I think this is all just highlighted to them that they are losing their power, and we've seen that for technological reasons. The old gatekeepers are getting bypassed. Tucker just hosted that great conversation with all of the 2024 candidates on the Blaze last week. These old gatekeepers are losing their power. The New York Post is getting scoops the New York Times probably wishes that it had. Yeah. They're losing power, and so they're clinging even harder to it because they think that's the only way to sort of control the unwashed masses.
And I've noticed the more panicked they get, the more tyrannical they become. So this is a dangerous moment. Emily Jashinsky, thank you very much, as always, over at the Federalist, and you can hear her on Counterpoints as well. Emily, thank you so much.